Most of us think of Uber or Lyft as a simple convenience. You pull out your phone, tap a button, and within minutes, someone you've never met is pulling up to take you wherever you need to go. But when you really think about it, you're climbing into a stranger's car, at night, on an empty street, with the doors locked behind you. And sometimes those rides don't go the way you expect. Tonight, we're diving into real horror stories from people who thought they were just booking a ride, but instead found themselves trapped in something far more terrifying. Before we get into it, let me ask you this. If you got into a rideshare and felt something was wrong, would you confront the driver or stay silent until it was too late? Let me know down below. I read every single one. I had just left a bar downtown on a Friday night. It was a little past midnight, and the streets were still buzzing with people moving between clubs, taxis, and food trucks. My friends had already headed home, but I wasn't ready to call it a night just yet. I remember standing under a flickering street lamp, scrolling through my phone to order an Uber. The app matched me with a gray Toyota Corolla, license plate ending in 48X. Estimated wait time, 5 minutes. I leaned against the brick wall of the bar, idly refreshing my notifications as people around me disappeared into their rides. Finally, a gray car pulled up right to the curb. I opened the back door, slid inside, and said, "Hey, thanks for picking me up." The driver didn't respond. He just gave me a curt nod, his face shadowed by the glow of the dashboard. Without a word, he pulled away from the curb. The first red flag came almost immediately. Instead of following the GPS, which clearly displayed the route to my apartment, he made a sharp left down a quieter street. It wasn't the direction home. At first, I thought maybe he was dodging traffic, but when I checked the GPS again, his route didn't make sense. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The license plate didn't match. The car I'd gotten into wasn't my Uber. I sat frozen for a few moments, debating whether to say something. Then I cleared my throat and said, "Hey, I think you picked up the wrong passenger. This isn't my ride." The man's hands tightened around the steering wheel. Without looking back, he muttered, "Don't worry. I'll get you home safely." There was no warmth in his voice, just cold indifference, like he was reciting a line. My heart started racing. I reached for my phone, keeping it low in my lap, and texted my friend, "Not in my Uber. Wrong car. Here's my location." The driver noticed me glancing at my phone. His eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, locking with mine for a brief, unnerving second. His pupils looked dark and wide, like he hadn't blinked in minutes. He asked, "Who are you texting?" I swallowed and lied, "Just letting my roommate know I'm on the way." He didn't reply. He just kept driving, making turn after turn until I no longer recognized where we were. Streetlights grew fewer and fewer. Buildings turned into warehouses, then into stretches of empty road. At that point, I realized I had two options: confront him and demand to be let out, or quietly plan my escape. My hand hovered over the door handle, but the car was still moving too fast. Then, out of nowhere, he pulled into a deserted gas station lot. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly, casting the cracked pavement in a cold glow. The place was empty, not even a car at the pumps. The driver put the car in park and slowly turned toward me. "This is where you get out," he said flatly. Panic surged through me. There was no way I was stepping out into that empty lot. I yanked the door handle and bolted, sprinting across the pavement toward the convenience store attached to the station. The inside lights were on, but when I pulled the handle, it didn't budge. The doors were locked. I pounded on the glass, hoping the clerk would see me, but the counter was empty. When I turned back, the gray car was already peeling out of the lot, taillights fading into the night. I stood there shaking, locked out of the store, stranded in the middle of nowhere. Finally, I called the police, who sent a patrol car to pick me up. When I explained what happened, the officer just said, "You'd be surprised how often people impersonate rideshare drivers." When I checked my phone later, my real Uber was still waiting back at the bar. The driver had messaged me asking if I was still coming. That's when the full horror sank in. I never learned who that man was or what he planned to do with me. But I know for certain, if I hadn't noticed the wrong plate, or if I hadn't trusted my instincts at that gas station, I might not be here to tell this story. I drive part-time for Lyft. It's not my main source of income, just something I do on weekends to make a little extra money. I had my fair share of odd passengers before. Drunk people, awkward conversations, even the occasional person who just smelled terrible. But nothing that ever made me truly scared. That changed one Saturday night. It was around 11:30 p.m., and I had just dropped off a group of college kids. My next ride popped up almost instantly. The pickup location was a liquor store on the edge of downtown. I accepted, drove over, and waited. A man in his late 20s came out, hoodie pulled up, backpack slung over his shoulder. He looked ordinary enough, just another guy heading home after a night out. He got into the back seat, shut the door quietly, and muttered a flat, "Hey." The ride was only supposed to be 15 minutes. The address was in a quiet residential neighborhood I didn't recognize well, but GPS showed it was legitimate. I tried to make small talk, but he just stared out the window, mumbling under his breath. I couldn't make out the words. When we arrived at the house, I pulled up to the curb. The place was pitch dark. No lights inside, no porch light, no cars in the driveway. I put the car in park and turned slightly. "We're here." The passenger didn't move. He just sat there, staring at the house. I cleared my throat and said again, "This is the address you put in." That's when he slowly turned his head toward me. His hood slipped slightly, and I could see his eyes. They were wide, unblinking. He said in a voice that made my stomach turn, "This isn't my house." I tried to stay calm. "No problem. Do you want me to take you somewhere else?" He leaned forward until I could feel his breath against my shoulder. His whisper. I tried to stay calm. "No problem. Do you want?" I asked. "Where to?" His response, louder, more forceful. "Drive." My hands tightened on the wheel. I didn't know what this guy wanted, but I knew something was off. My instincts screamed at me not to head into the dark streets with him giving me no destination. Thinking quickly, I said, "Sure, but I need to get gas first." I pulled into a brightly lit station about 2 blocks away. I parked near the pump, took a breath, and prepared to bolt if I had to. But before I could even open my mouth, the passenger opened the door. He stepped out slowly, pulling his backpack higher on his shoulder. Without a word, he walked toward the side of the gas station, into the shadows behind it. I waited. 10 seconds, 30, a full minute. He never came back. I peered out the windows, but the side of the station was empty. Finally, I decided to leave. I ended the ride on the app and pulled away. Later that night, curiosity got the better of me. I checked my earnings log. The ride I just ended was marked as canceled. Payment declined. I reached out to Lyft support, and they told me the card used to request the ride was stolen. Not only that, but the name, photo, and phone number tied to the account were fake. The house? When I looked it up later, it had been abandoned for years. The property was boarded up, condemned. No one had lived there in over a decade. And the backpack he carried? I'll never know what was in it. But the way he stared at that empty house, the way he whispered to me to drive, as if it didn't matter where we went, it felt like I narrowly escaped something much worse than just a strange passenger. To this day, I still drive for Lyft, but only during the day. I'll never forget that night. Sometimes, when I pull into a gas station, I half expect to see him standing there in the shadows, waiting for another ride. This story didn't happen to me directly. It happened to my cousin. And to this day, she refuses to use rideshare apps again. The details she told me were so unsettling that I honestly don't blame her. It was a weekday night, around 2 a.m. She had just finished a long, late shift at work. Her car had been in the shop, so she ordered an Uber to get home. She was exhausted, so tired she was fighting to stay awake while waiting outside her workplace. When her Uber pulled up, a black sedan, everything looked normal. She checked the license plate and the driver photo on the app. It all matched. She slid into the back seat, thanked the driver, and settled in for the 20-minute ride. For the first few minutes, everything was fine. The driver seemed polite enough, kept his eyes on the road, no weird small talk. My cousin was so drained, she almost dozed off against the window. That's when she heard it. A whisper. At first, she thought the driver had said something. She opened her eyes slightly, glanced up at the rear-view mirror, but his lips weren't moving. He was focused on the road. She tried to brush it off as her imagination, but then it happened again, this time clearer. A whisper right next to her ear, so close it made her whole body shiver. It said, "Don't get out when he stops." Her eyes shot open. She turned her head toward the seat next to her. Empty. Just her, the driver, and silence. But she swore she felt the faint shift of weight on the seat, as if someone had been sitting there. She didn't move, didn't speak, just sat frozen, staring at her phone screen like she was distracted. Her heart was pounding so loud, she thought the driver might hear it. When the car finally slowed in front of her apartment building, the driver smiled in the rear-view mirror. "We're here," he said casually. But that warning replayed in her mind. Don't get out when he stops. Every instinct told her not to leave the car. Forcing a shaky smile, she pretended to check her phone. Then she lied. "Oh, I put in the wrong address. Can you take me to my friend's place instead?" The driver's expression shifted. His smile faded instantly. His jaw tightened. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at her through the mirror with a look that made her stomach twist. Finally, he muttered, "Sure." The ride felt endless. She tried not to make eye contact, but she could feel his eyes flicking back to the mirror every few seconds. She held her phone in her lap, thumb hovering over the emergency call button. The new destination she gave him wasn't her friend's house. It was the nearest police station. She didn't tell him that. She just read the address off casually, like it was a neighborhood. Finally, after several tense minutes, The car pulled up in front of the station. As soon as he stopped, she bolted. She flung the door open, sprinted toward the entrance, and didn't look back. When she finally turned around from inside the lobby, the black sedan was already gone, sped off before anyone could get the plate number. She reported what happened to the officers at the desk, but without details, there wasn't much they could do. To this day, she swears there had been someone else in that back seat with her. Some presence that warned her not to get out. Maybe it was her imagination, maybe exhaustion. But she insists it felt real. And she still wonders, what would have happened if she had gotten out when the driver stopped at her building? Every time you climb into a stranger's car, you're putting your trust into them completely. Most rides end fine. But as you just heard, not every trip makes it safely to its destination. Which of these stories made you think twice about booking your next ride? Let me know in the comments. I'm always reading them. And if you enjoyed this, make sure to check out my other creepy files. There are plenty more stories waiting for you in the dark.